Clinical Director for Recovery Happens Counseling Service in Roseville, as well as other Northern California locations, specializing in the outpatient treatment of adolescents, young adults, and their families with addictive disorders and dual diagnosis issues. Mr. Day.
Thank you. 20 years of experience in Sacramento working with teens and young adults with addiction. We see 110 people a week. The sample size is huge. It's my passion to help educate the communities about this issue. What I will tell you is when the OxyContin crisis kicked in 6 years ago, half of our program were OxyContin addicts. We saw the methamphetamine addiction stuff in the late 90s, 1999. We were in the thick of the ecstasy epidemic. Guess which drug has been the hardest to treat in my outpatient treatment program? Marijuana. Do you know why? Because addicts don't hit bottom until the system hits bottom. And everyone freaks out about OxyContin, and everyone freaks out about ecstasy and methamphetamine, but when it comes to marijuana, boys will be boys. It's teenage years, it's a phase of life, it's a rite of passage. The denial and enabling from systems, the legal system, healthcare systems, and on, has made it hard for me to be effective treating young people with marijuana addiction. Today, we know from the data and neuroscience that's clear, that if you're using it at a young age, it's going to affect the development of your brain. Your brain is growing until your late 20s, and if you're putting marijuana in, it's telling that brain it doesn't need to produce dopamine, serotonin, and other neurochemicals that are necessary. For a lot of teenagers that I work with, they experience what's very normal during the teenage years, and that is stress, tension, anxiety, a lot of pressure. And for normal kids, that's okay, because that drives them to reach out to relationships, to try new things like basketball, sports, to talk about music and other things. Sadly, I get to see when those kids try marijuana, and then that stunts their development. It stunts their coping skills, it stunts their social ability, and it stunts their neurobiology. I know that a lot of the people regarding Prop 64 don't want me to say this, but I have to because I share the truth. In my 20-year experience, what I will tell you is this. The heroin epidemic that we are in, at least in the community where I live, the young adults that are homeless that we see that are heroin addicts in our community, many of them were marijuana addicts that couldn't get well in my program or other programs at age 16 that are now young adult heroin addicts. There is a link. There is a link. Psychosis, psychotic breaks. We know today from the data, and I think I got the data, some of Christine, 15 to 30% of these young people are likely to have a psychotic break. The risk for schizophrenia almost doubles. We've known for 20 years that if you are a teen or young adult using drugs, that you have 5 times more likely to have a mental health issue. So what are we doing? I follow the Monitoring the Future survey out of the University of Michigan. It's been tracking the trends of teen drug use since 1975. It's always been nicotine and alcohol were the first drugs, and marijuana was later. In 2010, marijuana was the first drug used by people. Do you know why? The ad campaigns to make it legal for medical use. It was completely tethered to that. The other thing that the Monitoring the Future survey tells us is that families who have a favorable attitude about use have kids that use. So what happens when we have a state that says it's okay? And the vertical integration business model is, if Prop 64 should pass, it's now sold at Costco. It's now sold at Safeway. It's now sold, you name it. I'm in addiction. I'm in recovery from addiction, and when I was a teenager, marijuana was my addiction. And yeah, I tried alcohol. And you know what? When I was a teenager, it was easy to buy alcohol because you just went up to the homeless guy next to the liquor store and you said, bro, I'll buy you a 40 if you buy me a 40. You know? So what's going to happen for these young people when they could do the very same thing relative to marijuana? My heart hurts. Yesterday I got a call from high school, a very well-known high school in our community. And the mom said, could you please come out and talk to our kids and talk to our staff? Because these kids are using marijuana. The staff don't know what to do about it, and the kids are talking Prop 64. I have an outpatient program. I'm investing time, energy, motion, and money. My family's here today to push back on Prop 64. Should Prop 64 pass, my business profits will double, triple. I have programs for schools that are alternative to suspensions. That'll be in high demand. Certainly we don't have schools and even some clinicians that understand what cannabinoid hyperemesis is. Yet we know that there's 1 to 2 cases a week. 3 days of vomiting. It's an allergic reaction. We need to understand this issue. My final thought would be, is a message to Darrell Steinberg, who I think I've already spoke to it. Darrell Steinberg, I have to say, has been the biggest helper for us when it comes to mental health. He stood on the steps of this Capitol just a week ago, and he said, I fully support suicide prevention and awareness, and we need to do more about that. At the same time, he endorsed Prop 64. Darrell Steinberg, do you know that when young people use drugs, they're 5 times more likely to have a mental health issue? Darrell Steinberg, do you know that when young people are using drugs and their brain's still developing and it interrupts the development of their dopamine system and the serotonin system, they become more impulsive. And they're more depressed because their brain is broken. Darrell Steinberg, do you want us to have more teens with more impulsivity and depression because of Prop 64? That's the effects we know from clear data, scientific peer-reviewed academic journal articles. I teach grad school. I was going to be a research psychologist. I'm not going to say anything unless it can be backed up. Saying you're for suicide prevention, but then voting for Prop 64 does not make sense. It contradicts itself. Please listen, Darrell. I'd love to have a conversation with you. Thank you for your time.